Welcome back, guys. Hope everything is going well for you. We have really been taking a look at how economists think, and we're going to continue that very briefly today. And this is a question I pose to you. Do definitions matter? Absolutely. So much disagreement occurs between people because when they are discussing a topic, they're not actually defining the topic the same exact way. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. What you see is actually 5 different definitions of economics from 5 different college level textbooks. And I want you guys to look, cross-reference, and you're going to see a lot of very comparable terms. So be flexible with your vocabulary. I always like to say economics is about people that make choices under conditions of scarcity. And no matter how you might wrap that up in these very impressive business sounding words, economics fundamentally still is just about people. So let's be very clear as we go throughout this entire class that when we say something, we need to make sure we are very clear about what it is what we're saying. In summary, never use the term like. It just throws some confusion out there. And of course, that is the biggest drawback in your generation, how much you guys ever use that word. What is opportunity cost? Well, this is my great slide. And the question is, why do economists have such few friends? This is an awful question. And it's not awful because it's implying that they have very few friends. The question is unanswerable because of the word few. Generally, what exactly does that mean? Is it mean a few in terms of 100? Most of you would say, well, no, 100 is a lot of people. Well, 100 people with respect to a city is a very small percentage of the overall population, which is why the question needs to always be phrased and the statement needs to always be phrased as clearly as you can. And the real question is, it doesn't matter if I put, why do economists have so many friends? All I want you guys to understand is that opportunity cost always exists. Opportunity cost, very common term used over and over in the Wind household, where my kids ask, hey, Dad, can I? Hey, can I? Can I? No, opportunity cost, opportunity cost, opportunity cost. Children, nothing is free. When you choose A, you forego B. Well, Mr. Wynn, you're wrong. I just had my buddy buy me a free lunch yesterday. No. Number one, it took time, ergo, that's a cost. B, it took resources to get to the restaurant. That's a cost. C, and most importantly, that meat on your hamburger, the bun, the lettuce, the tomato, the whatever you have, could have gone to something else. Every decision you make comes with a cost. Economists refer to that as opportunity cost. Don't let that weigh you down. The moment you begin to realize that every decision is a trade-off, the more comfortable you actually begin to make in terms of actual decisions. Opportunity cost. Next, many people have been brought up generally in junior high where they begin to be encouraged to develop actual opinions and to interpret events and to make conclusions. And already as an economist, I'm going to tell you that your number one phrase should always be, when somebody tells you a cause and effect relationship, you should always state, name, not necessarily. Moral of the story, be very careful about claiming a cause-effect relationship. Generally speaking, your conclusions could be not necessarily correct. And they fall into what are 3 of these general fallacies well known for those who try to engage in economic policy. Number 1 is correlation versus causation. And of course, just because there's a very strong mathematical correlation, which shows a pattern based on a series of repetitive events, Do not assume that the correlation therefore implies a causation. A fine example always will be, hey, I noticed that on the day of, let's say, any sort of car accident, the sun rose in the morning. Am I to assume, therefore, that the sun rising in the morning is the reason for the car accident? The answer is not yes, and the answer is not no. The answer the economist would always tell you is, whoa, just hold on. Not necessarily. Down here, we have something called post hoc ergo propter hoc. Loosely translated, for all of you who took Latin, look, Latin does have a purpose. It means after this, therefore because of this. Meaning, just because event A occurs before event B does not mean that event B was caused by event A. Perfect example. Hey, the day before the Denver Broncos won the Super Bowl, way back when, I wore my lucky shirt. Since they won the Super Bowl after I wore my lucky shirt, therefore, my wearing of the lucky shirt was the reason. The economist would say, not necessarily. You might be engaging what is known as post hoc ergo propter hoc. Another very common fallacy is known as fallacy of composition. It actually works the other way, known as fallacy of division, which is if something is true for a part, therefore it's true for the whole. Or if something is true for the whole, therefore it's true of the parts. It works both ways, ladies and gentlemen. That is when an attribute is improperly transferred, meaning not necessarily. I often hear this because it is in vogue nowadays to lump everybody into categorical groups and then to make a concluding statement about a single individual based on the fact you've lumped them into the group. And one more time, the moral is not yes or no. The moral is not necessarily, which then leads back to my previous slide. Mr. Wynn, why do economists have such few friends? Well, we are people who are always going to listen to what somebody has to say, and then we're going to say, hold on, not necessarily. Be very careful about conclusions you reach in this class. And that's generally what we call as positive and normative economics. Positive is a factual statement. Like, for example, let's say that, hey, the minimum wage is $12. That's a factual statement. Therefore, we would call that a positive economic statement. The minimum wage should be higher would be an example of a normative economic statement where you're clearly imparting and implying some sort of bias or opinion. Or even normative would be the minimum wage is necessary. Absolutely not necessarily true, ladies and gentlemen. That clearly could be a debatable topic where you and I might be able to bring in a lot of data to argue why our opinion is correct. The most important thing for you and I, that is an opinion. That is a normative economic statement. Be very careful about where you are and what you are saying. So, historically, what do we know? Well, we talked about our definition of economics. People making choices under condition of scarcity. Scarcity drives choice. We talk about the development of formal economic theory, which is more of a class in college than is of this class. And we discuss this idea of what exactly is utility. Utility is a term for economists, just simply is describing how much joy and or pleasure you get out of a particular good or service. Meaning this, hey, Mr. Wynn, why did you buy the hamburger? I wanted to. What that means is that I derive utility from the hamburger. Don't confuse that with an English class and the definition maybe of usefulness. That's not what we're talking about. We actually, in terms of formal theory, have a unit of utility. They're called utils, and we use the whole idea of utils just to perhaps develop some mathematical models to help drive home the idea. It was a big deal. It's called the marginal analysis revolution, and there were some big time economists back in the day. And of course, you guys will not probably recognize these names because economics is a very narrow field. And it discussed what is called marginal analysis. And the word marginal, what does that mean? Well, generally speaking, when I talk about the word marginal, I mean additional. So I can use the word marginal and I can put it in front of the word utility, and I'm asking, oh, what is the additional pleasure or satisfaction you get out of something? Meaning, well, let's say, if you said, well, I studied an additional hour for a test this weekend, that would be engaging in marginal analysis. Marginal means additional. So the economists pointed out there's a fundamental difference between total utility and marginal utility. So let's take a look. It's called the water diamond paradox historically. So what do I know about the marginal utility of water? Meaning, how much additional joy do I get out of consuming an additional unit of water? And you and I both know, not much, quite honestly. Well, yes, I do. Well, no, because if you were taking a sip of water and I just ask you, well, how much joy did you get out of your first sip? You'd say, oh, I don't know, Mr. 5 utils maybe? And then I'd say, well, how much out of the next sip? And you would say, well, 4 utils. And it wouldn't be, in theory, a big amount to you because you're answering, though you never knew it, with respect to additional utility. But I do notice that you consume a lot of water. So if I was to sum up all of the marginal utilities of your entire water consumption, meaning the sum of a lot of small numbers, I end up with a very, very large number. You consume a lot of water. Each additional unit of water brings with you not very much additional utility. On the flip side, we have this notion called the diamond. And this is called the water diamond paradox because people were perplexed as to the relationship between prices in the market system and goods and services, of which one, like water, you need or you will not survive. And diamonds you do not need at all. And what they found is this: hey, how much additional utility would you get from the additional diamond if I was to give it to you? And you tell me, oh my goodness, wouldn't I be so excited to have an additional diamond? Why is that? Oh, it's just so important to me. It's just, here we go, worth so much. But not many people own a lot of diamonds. Therefore, when I add up not a lot of marginal utilities, I get a total utility that relatively to water is simply not as much. But then let's jump to the price system. How much does water cost you? It doesn't cost me anything. Some of you might have said, it's free. Look, I can get it from the drinking fountain. Well, once again, nothing is free in economics, but I understand what you're trying to tell me. And you notice that, oh, but the price of a diamond, if I go to Jared's Jewelry and I look to a diamond for my spouse-to-be, it's just so expensive. And that's one of the big conclusions, is that prices are related to the marginal utility of a good or service, not the total utility. One more time. People take prices for granted, but in capitalism and the market system, prices send signals to consumers and producers. And prices will reflect the decisions of those consumers and producers. And these economists connected prices to the marginal utility of goods and services with respect to each particular consumer themselves, and then the sum total, which of course is captured in what is called the price in the market. Let's maybe jump and show you a different example in the business world, how the producers make marginal decisions. So, marginal analysis. Let us say that a business is producing a particular type of good and service, and there it is. It is what is known as a clip. Now, why we use this clip is not important. Only it matters is whether or not you want one and how much you would be willing to pay for one. So let's say that the business who just has the idea needs to hire what is called labor, or the worker. Many of you, I have no doubt, are currently employed. That is a business who has agreed to hire you, the additional worker. And let's say that when the business hired you and you work only by yourself, you're the only worker in that business, that at most you can make a total product of one particular good or service. And then your buddy says, hey, I saw you were working. You think they're going to hire me? And the business does hire them. So the business now has 2 workers. And together, you and your buddy produce 4 units of the good or service. Now, as you can see, the hiring of your buddy, the additional worker, doesn't necessarily mean they are better than you, because now simply, generally speaking, we are working together. Efficiency. Based on that notice, the business hires a 3rd worker, and together all 3 of you produce 9 units of a good or service. Wow, okay, I'm looking at these numbers changing. I'm looking at the number. I am the business owner. I am known as what is the entrepreneur. I'm the one who needs to take the risk and make these decisions. I hire a 4th worker. They produce 11. I hire a 5th worker. They produce 12. And here we go. Should the business hire a 6th worker? Well, ladies and gentlemen, it doesn't matter if it's a worker, whether it's a piece of equipment, whether it's another good, open another hour, maybe open earlier by an hour. All of those decisions fall under this large umbrella called marginal analysis. Let's actually calculate the marginal product by looking at the total product that has been based on the inputs of production. So when I had no workers, though it's not on the table, I had no product. But by hiring the additional 1 worker, I got an additional 1 product. And what that means is that the marginal product of the 1st worker is 1. The 1st worker brought in an additional 1 product. Let's figure out the marginal product of the 2nd worker. I noticed that by hiring the 2nd worker, I was able to produce an additional 3 units of product. That additional quantity of product is called the marginal product of the 2nd worker. Now, many of you, of course, are very pattern-oriented thinkers, inductive reasoning, in which case I know you're going to crack the code, but don't lose sight of the economic idea. What is the marginal product of the 3rd worker? Well, I noticed by hiring the 3rd worker, I brought in an additional 5 units. That is called the marginal product of the 3rd worker. Speeding this up, the marginal product of the 4th worker was, you should be saying 2, and the marginal product of the 1st worker is 1. Of the 5th worker, excuse me, is 1. So businesses engage in marginal analysis. You engage in marginal analysis. Your parents engage in marginal analysis. Teachers engage in marginal analysis. Everybody makes decisions in what economists refer to as a margin. This is a desk. It is used to produce. This must be produced itself. It's called capital. This is a pair of scissors. Scissors themselves are used to produce. This is called capital. This is the physical talent used in conjunction with capital, called labor. Who and how much of each are going to be used is entirely up to this special individual we call the entrepreneur. But the purpose of the entrepreneur is to arrange labor and capital and economic land to produce goods and services which they hope, but they never know for sure, is ultimately purchased by the consumer. There is an assignment that lets you take a look at some of the expectations of graphing and be able to engage in simple calculations. that is required on the AP called the marginal analysis assignment on Google Classroom. Based on the note, you guys make sure you have yourselves a great, let's see if I turn that on. Dan, I look forward to seeing you guys.